Good morning, everyone. We'll get off to a slow start so that people I can still see people joining the meeting. So we'll give it a little bit of a slow start this morning. Today's webinar is a basics webinar for new organizations, new administrators, and just kind of getting started with the events module. We're going to be going over a couple of items to help people who are new to ClubExpress kind of get to know the event calendar. This will be part of a few webinars we're going to do on events. Likely it'll be a two-part where we'll go over kind of today the basics, and then we're going to dive into a slightly more advanced topic in a few weeks to about a month here. You'll see that on the calendar. All right, so let's get into the overview of today's webinar. We're going to be going over a few topics. Events is a topic that I can tend to get a little long-winded about just because there's so many moving parts. Today, we're going to really try to focus in on, uh, when I say getting started, just truly getting into creating an event, getting an event on your calendar, making sure that your users can see it, and the basics of what is required for a functional event. In an upcoming webinar, we'll get into some of the advanced stuff like multiple activity events and kind of like sending emails from an event. But today, we're really just trying to get through um, getting an event on your calendar and getting it there in a way so that people can register and people can pay if there's a fee associated. But the first thing we're going to talk about is kind of the organization, which is event categories. So we're going to talk about how to categorize your event, make your events easier to find on the calendar. Then we're going to talk about the different views, so the different ways that people can take a look at the calendar and how they interact with it. So there's two different kind of ways people can see the calendar. And then from there, we'll go straight into creating a basic event. So we're going to walk through step by step of how to get from no event on the calendar to having a functional event that people can register for on your calendar. And then we'll actually kind of log out and look at that from an outside perspective and register for that event. And then towards the end, we'll talk a little bit about our event defaults, which is a really useful tool to make creating events a lot easier and a lot faster. If you have, if you're an organization that runs similar events over and over, we can kind of make that a default. So that way it saves us some clicks, saves us some time as we're creating a bunch of events. All right, so the first thing we're talking about is our event categories. This is something that gets glossed over a lot. People kind of know that ClubExpress loves to categorize things. We categorize our members, we categorize our forums, but event categories is specifically useful. It lets you do a couple really interesting things. Specifically, you can color code your calendar events so that when people are just taking a glance at the calendar, they can look at a little legend and see, oh, all of the, social events are green, all of the board meetings are blue, and then they can just look at your calendar. And if you have a lot of events there, they can easily pick out visually what items they might be interested in clicking on and learning more about. It also, when you categorize your calendar, it lets you filter your calendar. So anyone who's looking at the calendar, whether they're a member, an admin, or a non-member, there will be filter options so they can see I only want to look at social events and bike club or like bike rides or something like that, and they can kind of filter it down if they aren't interested in looking at things like board meetings or potlucks or something like that. So it allows them to filter to only the categories they're looking for. When you're creating a category, there's also an option, and we'll talk a little bit about this, especially when we're talking about the events default page. But there's an option to allow non-admin members, so members who don't have any sort of administrative control or additional options, you can allow standard members to create quick events on the site. So if you're an organization where people are, hosting their own events, hey, come over to my house for a game night, or, we're meeting up to go on a bike ride on, every other Thursday, you can allow your members to put that on the calendar. There are limitations for quick events, and we're not going to go super deep into quick events today. We're mainly focusing on the kind of like standard jack of all trades event that we'll be talking about today, but it allows members to kind of put their own information on the calendar. Once you create a calendar, an event calendar category, it is important to note that it can't be deleted if there are any events of that category, because obviously every event needs to fit within some category. So if we remove a category and there are events in that category, they would be category list, and we can't have that. So you'll notice when you're messing around with categories that you won't see a trash can icon unless you were to go to the system and remove or change all of the events of that category to something else, or just remove them completely. But we'll take a look at that in a couple seconds here. But for now, let me go ahead and switch over to my screen share and walk through our category options so we can see what I'm talking about here. So this is one of our demo websites. This is the Northwest Balloon Club. I'm logged in as an administrator, so you can see the control panel options in the upper right. When we click on control panel, if we want to go and take a look at our events, the tab of the website we go to from the control panel is website tab, and then we head over to events under website modules. That is how we get into the kind of back end of the events module. When we click on events, we will land on the events manager page where we can see a couple of buttons to manage things for our event. And then we'll also see the option to search for existing events. I usually just leave this blank. If you just hit search with a blank event with a blank search up here, it shows us all of our events that are coming up. The default is to sort by the most recent event. So the farthest into the future, scrolling down farthest into the past. But for now, to get to our categories, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top section up here. We're going to click on configure, and you'll see a lot of configure options here. And the one we're looking for right now is event categories. So this is where all of our event categories live. And as you add categories, you'll see the name of the category, whether or not we've allowed members to create quick events in that category. And then we'll see the color code for that category. So this is how we've organized and kind of color separated our categories. And then you'll see the maintain option where we can make edits to those categories or delete them. You'll notice there's only one category that has the trash can icon. That means the rest of these categories have events in them. If I wanted to delete a different category, I would need to go and search for events in that category and make sure that they belong to a different category. We will only see this trash can if that category is completely empty of all events. That includes archived and canceled events too. So we need to make sure it's completely empty before it can be deleted. If we wanted to edit or create a new category, we can either click on the pencil, or to add one, there's a little button at the top that says add event category. When we click on that, we'll see the option to fill in a category name. So we can say, this is our conferences category. You'll see there's a checkbox below that says enable for member quick events. That's that option I was talking about that would allow members to create their own quick events within this category. If I leave that unchecked, then this category is not an option for members to create quick events in. A quick note about that: if you do check this option and you notice that members still aren't allowed to create quick events, you do still need to turn the option on at all in the event defaults page. And we'll be talking and looking at the events default page a little bit later. So if you turn that on and you notice that people still aren't able to create quick events, there's one more setting we have to make sure that is turned on in order for that to function. And we'll be taking a look at that a little bit later. Then we get our colors, and this is where we can decide on the kind of color separation for this category. We have a text color and a background color. So we can say, I want the text to be black, or we can also change to, we can either enter a color code, or we can just select a color from this little color grid here. So I want my text to be purple, and you'll see the sample text updates to show me what it's going to look like on my calendar. And we can also change the background color. We can give it a little background of a different color. We can say, I want it to be bright green. And so now we've got purple text with a bright green background, and people can see from the legend when they're looking at our calendar, or when they filter for events of this category, they'll say, oh, a bright green background with purple text, that means it's a conference. It's just a visually distinctive way to separate events when they're looking at the calendar. These next items here are a little bit more advanced options, specifically the member attachments we'll talk about in other webinars. But the limit registration option, this is something that very few organizations use, but those who use it are very fond of it. It's a way to limit people to only a certain number. So if you have, organizations that are only allowed to do, X number of bike rides a year, or you're only allowed to attend a certain number of board meetings if you're not like a board member or something like that, you can limit members to a certain number. You can say from this date to this date, you're only allowed to attend, 5 of these events. Again, not something that I see get used by a lot of organizations, but those who like to be able to limit a certain category of events, they really need that function. All we really need, the only thing we need are these first 4 options. These 2 are kind of optional. So we'll set this up. We'll say we have our now conferences category saved. we should see conferences on the list right there. And we'll see there's our purple text with a green background. And because I just created it, there's no events within it yet, so we can still see that trash can. Once we create an event in the conferences category, that trash can will disappear until we were to remove it again. So now let's go take a look at what the calendar actually looks like, and let's see what those categories look like and how members filter for it. So when we go to our homepage, if we leave the calendar manager on our website, the calendar link is called What We're Doing. And this is our calendar that we've created. And you can see when we look at the calendar, there's a few options for how we actually see the calendar. The default on this website is for people to see the calendar in the list view. So instead of a grid of a like month type calendar, we see a list of calendar events. So we can see there's a lot of sign language classes. I just created a bunch of those for a different webinar. I left them in here so we can have a nice populated calendar. You'll notice that the color pops here. We've got this dark blue background, and then some events, this is the one that I'll be using a little bit later, that have a different color background. So in our list view, the colors we've selected show up on the kind of date icon here. There is an alternate view that people can see when they're looking at the calendar. When we go to the upper right-hand section over here, you'll see a couple icons. There's a search icon, there's a calendar grid icon, and then there's the option to change what time frame we're looking at. If I click on this calendar icon in the upper right-hand corner up here, it'll change the view of my calendar to a grid view instead. So now we're looking at that standard calendar month grid view of our calendar. You'll see all the same events show up, but now they're laid out in a calendar grid format. And we can switch between those all we like. You'll notice now in the upper right-hand corner, instead of the calendar grid, we get this little dotted list. And if we click on that, it takes us right back to our list view. Anyone can do this. You don't have to be an administrator. So any user on your website, if they're looking at it one way and they want to switch to the other, we can come back here and switch to a different view. If they want to look at different months on the grid view, all they have to do is look at the little April option up here, and they can kind of click the little arrows to cycle through different months that they want to look at on the calendar. And if they ever get too far into the future, they can always click the today button and it'll jump them back to showing them the current month. Similarly, if we go back to our list view very quickly, by clicking that icon in the upper right hand corner. From our list view, you'll notice we have a month here, and we can jump to different months by clicking these little drop down previous months or future months here. You get one additional option when you're looking at the list view as well, which is the option to look into the future or look at different time frames when you're looking at the list view. So right now we're looking at the list view for the month of April. We can change that list view to show us only a week, and it'll show us the current week, and it'll give us that little time frame here. We can also change that to look at a very specific day. There's only one sign language class happening today. Or we can say the option future, which means all upcoming events. Anything that is an event taking place in the future, it'll show up on this list. So April, May, regardless, it doesn't matter. Everything that's taking place today or later will show up when we choose that future option. So that's the difference between list and calendar view. Some people some people in their organization will prefer to see the calendar grid. Some people prefer to see the list view. Any user can switch between it, and once they switch, it should stick for as long as they stay logged in. If you want to set a default, again, this is a setting that we can set on our event defaults page that we'll be talking about a little bit later. We can actually go to our event defaults and say, I want users when they first click on the calendar to see the grid, or we can change it so that they first see the list. That's a control we have. That just determines, it doesn't mean that they're stuck on that view. They can switch to whichever they prefer. It's just what they see when they first click on the calendar themselves. So we set up our categories. We've decided how we want to see the calendar. I mentioned that you can use event categories to filter the calendar as well. So we'll see we have different colored events depending on what category they're in. If we wanted to filter the calendar, this little search icon up here will allow us to change the options that we're seeing. So we can do things like included categories. We can even exclude categories. We can, if we're an organization with subgroups, we can change what subgroups we're looking for. I'm not going to be getting deep into subgroups today, but we can do specifically, I like to show off the calendar filter option. So I can come in here and I can say, instead of looking at every calendar, I'm interested only in education items. And if I check that option and hit search, it'll simplify, it'll remove all the things that aren't the education category. So now I only see my events webinar. If I want to come back and see something else, I can always either reset and just wipe out my search so that it shows me everything, or I can come in and I can select different categories. This is a way that people can, if you've heavily categorized your calendar, they can come in and choose what items they're interested in viewing on the calendar. That holds true on our list view as well. So even if we switch over to the list view, we still have this hourglass where we can search and say, once again, maybe I only want to see the education items. And now my list is only showing me education items. It's important to keep in mind that once you save that, once you search, it'll keep that search for as long as this session stays active. If I were to log out or close the window and come back to the calendar, it should reset to show me everything. So that way it's not going to be stuck forever. But it will remember if I was to, search for something and then click a different link and click back, it should still be showing me the search that I did before. All right. So we've talked about categories. We've talked about how people can look for and find events. Let's actually walk through creating an event really quickly. So once again, I'm going to head back to my control panel. And I'm going to go to the website tab again, and I'm going to find my events module here. So to get to our categories, we clicked on configure. The add button on the left-hand side of this row of buttons is where we go to create an event. And there's 3 different options. There's event, quick event, and notification. Notification is just simply a button or some text that you put on the calendar. If it's someone's birthday, but it's not actually an event happening, you could do that. If it's your club's anniversary, that would be a notification. If it's an event that people sign up for, that would be either a quick event or an event. Today, we're going to be going into a standard event. It has a lot more controls. There's a lot more options to turn on and off. Quick events are a little bit more simplified. The reason I like to primarily educate on standard events is because all the settings that you'll see in a quick event also show up in a standard event, with one exclusion, which is the RSVP option is only available for quick events. But if you know how to build a standard event, then everything on the quick event creation should also make sense. So let's go ahead and click add, and then we'll choose to create an event. This will take us to our basic info page. This is the first page. You'll hear me use the term panel a few times throughout the event creation. That just means that there are different selections that we can make. There's different configuration pages that we'll look at, and we call those panels. You'll see why in just a second. If we look at our basic info page, the first thing we need to decide is what type of event are we hosting. Most events are going to be a single activity event. That just means you're signing up for this event. You can still do things like ask questions. You can still have people sign up for like different meal options. Multiple activity events are usually reserved for large events like conferences, where people are signing up for speaker panels, or perhaps they're signing up for multiple different registration days. So if it's taking place, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they want to be able to buy a ticket for just Monday, Tuesday, or just a ticket for Wednesday, that would be a multiple activity event. Again, most events just have a single activity. We're going to call this event our events webinar. You can choose to fill in a short description. If you use the events widget on your homepage, short descriptions are usually useful because that's where that's going to show up. It is not required for you to fill in a short description. I usually leave mine blank. We do have to select a category. So we created those categories before, and I'm going to say this, instead of education, I'm going to call this a conference. So this is in the conferences category. We have an option to select a subgroup. For today, I'm going to not kind of delve into the option for subgroups. So this is where we would select it if it was for a specific subgroup of the organization. One thing that is important is visibility. So this doesn't yet determine who can register or anything like that. This is just who can actually see that this event is on the calendar. So when we look at visibility, we have a few options. The default for most people is just visible to everyone. So if you're creating this event, it shows up on the calendar, whether you're a member or a non-member. If you look at the calendar, it shows up. There's a few other options like visible to everyone, details for members only, meaning everyone can see that the event is taking place. But if you click on it, you have to be a logged in member to get the full details. That's useful to help members remember to log in order to register for an event. That way, they're not able to kind of like go into the event and register without logging in. It helps stop from creating excess non member records. It also is a way to kind of let the public see, like, hey, we're an active club, but the benefits of membership are that you get to, register and see details about our events. There's also visible to members only, similar to what we just saw before. But if a non member looks at your calendar or a member who isn't yet logged in, it won't even show up. It'll be like it's not taking place at all. Once you log into the website and look at the calendar, then you would actually see that it's there. Similarly, we have these two options, visible to interest group or visible to committee. If we select either of those, it'll ask us, okay, which committee are we talking about? We can check one or multiple committees. Same with our interest groups. We can select one or multiple interest groups. And if we choose those options, then the event only shows up on the calendar if you are a member in that interest or a member in that committee. And then finally, an option that I actually end up using quite a bit is not visible. I will often choose an event to be not visible while I'm working on it if I'm not ready for it to be, populated on the calendar. I can still access it from the event manager page, and I can still go in and make changes. And then once I'm ready for this event to, start accepting registrations, I can then come back in here and switch it to, whatever visibility option I want. Finally, there's also a date visible option. So we can say, hey, I don't want this to show up on the calendar until, Friday morning. And then once the calendar ticks over to 425, it'll pop up on the calendar. But before then, it will not display. It'll be set to not visible until that date. The rest of these settings I usually leave alone. Things like the view button, view details is usually fine. Contact prompt. So this is what we call the people who are contacts for the event. You can change that to something like event chair if you like, but event contact is usually fine. Same for event webpage site. This just allows you to build a link. So if you're hosting an event with another organization or you have a link to a hotel or something like that that you wanted to include, you could build a link right there, but it's not required for your event to function. Same is true for mobile channel. That only applies to organizations who have set up the ClubExpress mobile app. What is required, so the next very important setting is our start and finish date and time. So we've got our start time and our start date here, and then we've got our finish date and time as well. So we're going to say this event is going to take place, we'll go ahead and say next Wednesday. So we've set the date that the event starts. We also have an option over here for the time that the event starts. We can either type that time in or click the little clock icon here to switch to select from a list here. And we can say, that our webinars usually start at 11. We can choose to display the time or not. It will still display the date, but if we uncheck this box, then the time won't show up on the event. So if you have an event taking place that's an all-day event or it doesn't have a firm start time, you can choose not to display the time at all. That way it doesn't look like it's got a specific time. Same for our finish date. You don't actually have to fill in the finish date if it's a single day event. So if it's just a date taking place, for an hour on a certain day, if we leave this blank, the event module will figure out, okay, it's just taking place on 4:30. You don't actually have to fill that in. Of course you can. And if it's a multi-day event, so let's say it's taking place across multiple days, we could say, yes, it runs from, Wednesday through Saturday, and we could fill in for a multi-day event. I always encourage people to select a time zone. It can just be very helpful to, especially if you're a national organization, to make sure that everyone has the accurate time. Because if you do not list a time zone, someone in California might show up at the wrong time as opposed to someone in New York. The next thing I want to show, the next important section I want to show is going to be the specify section down here. So specify what additional information. All of these are other panels that we will see when we continue on through our event creation. So we can do things like checking every single one of these if we want, or we can uncheck as many as possible. What I usually recommend is once you're familiar with all of the different configuration options, uncheck as many as you can that you don't need. When we look at the formatted description and or rules, that is an additional description panel. So Like this short description, formatted description gives us options to do things like embedding links and embedding images and longer form text. It's what shows up as the description of the event. We've got event contacts where we can assign people to be an event contact. That harkens back to this event contact prompt up here. That is just the person that is responsible for the event, and this is what we call them. If we turn on this event contacts option over here, that is where we can assign people. We can say, Cheryl is in charge of catering, David is in charge of attendance tracking. You can kind of list who is in charge of what functions of the event, and we can actually assign people to be administrators of the event. I'm not going to go too much deeper into that today because you don't need that in order for your event to function. You can leave that completely alone and your event will still work just fine. For location, that's usually one that I do turn on for most of my events because it's where the event is taking place. Whether it's a physical event or it's a virtual event, both of those options will show up in location. So if you don't have a physical location for your event, you can still turn that on and you can let people know that locate, it's going to be virtual via Zoom or by a Teams meeting or something like that. Or if it's taking place at a clubhouse, that's where we fill that data in. These next two, I always encourage people, make sure you turn on registration and fees and who can register. These two are the most important ones. If we are missing either of those, then people cannot register for the event. So if you want people to sign up for your event, both of these are required. There are cases where people want to put, non-standard events on their calendar that don't actually require registration and they just have details, and people can sometimes uncheck these, and that's totally fine. But if you want people signing up on your website for your events and tracking how many people are signing up for your event, you need both of these in order for that to function. Then we have things like event questions where we can ask additional questions of people registering for our event. We've got things like email confirmation and reminders. That's where we can include additional information in the confirmation email. So whenever someone signs up for an event, they're going to get a confirmation email letting them know, hey, thanks for signing up. Here's the details again about the event. We can also set up event reminders. That is one that I always like to turn on because it's always important for us to have the option to give people additional information about the event and also remind people that they signed up or remind people to sign up. So we'll talk more about that one. And then we've got the option for cancellation and release agreement, and then the after the event options. Cancellation, this just is whether or not we are allowing members to cancel their own registration. So once someone signs up, they can cancel their own registration if we turn that on and set those settings in that panel. Keep in mind, even if we leave this unchecked, a person can always still be canceled by an administrator. So if they get in contact with an admin and say, hey, I can't make it to this event, can you cancel my registration? An admin can always do that whether or not we turn this on or off. And then finally, there's the after the event option where we can do things like linking to a photo album or linking to a custom page with details about the event, or including things like event certifications for those who attended. If you have questions about event certifications, we have a whole webinar just about event certifications on our YouTube channel. That's a whole probably half hour to talk about those. So I'm going to leave those off for today. What I'm going to do for today's kind of basic event, just focusing in on making sure the event is functional, is I'm going to leave it the way I have set here with my formatted description checked, my location checked, registration and fees, who can register, and email confirmations. The rest of these are mostly optional. We can build a completely functional event without those options. And the more things we uncheck here, the easier our event creation will be because there's fewer panels for us to configure. The more we check here, the more options we have to configure, but the longer our event creation process will take. At the bottom of this page, at the bottom of our basic info page, is a this panel is complete option. So this is the first panel of event creation. When we check this box, we are telling it, hey, all of our basic info and all of the options that we've selected are correct, and we have completed this page. It is primarily a way for you to keep track of what you've completed, and you'll see that in just a second. I do like to point out that if you leave specifically on the basic info, if you leave this panel is complete unchecked, then the event will not show up on the calendar, even if we've set it to visible, even if we set it to be visible, right now. If we leave this panel is complete unchecked, then the status of the event will still be pending. It is not a functional active event until we check on the basic info page this panel is complete. That's something we get calls about every once in a while is people saying, hey, why isn't my event showing up at the calendar? Oftentimes they forgot to check this option. So we'll go ahead and check that one and save. And once we save our basic info page, my website will load for a few seconds. There we go. Once we save on our basic info page, it's going to drop us back into the event edit page. So this is where we come and say, here's our events webinar. Here's all of the details that we just set up for our event. Across the top of this page, you'll see all of the management buttons. So I always like to point out to people, the buttons across the top up here, these are for managing an active event. The buttons, the kind of panels along the left-hand side over here, these are all of the options to configure the event. So we'll take care of the options on the left first. And then once those are done, we have a configured event and people start registering. We use these buttons across the top to manage an event as it's active. So we just completed our basic info page and we checked the this panel is complete option. So that's our very first panel at the top here. You'll notice there's a little green dot next to basic info, and then there's yellow dots next to the rest of our panels. That is that kind of option to keep track of what you have and have not configured. As we go through these configuration panels, these dots will turn green as we say that we've completed them. And once we have all greens across the board, we'll know that we've at least touched and edited every one of our panels. So that way we know, hey, this event's ready to go. I've, configured everything that I set up that I needed to configure. If we ever want to go back and add or remove one of these panels, we can always go and change the things we set in our basic infos. Just because we've created it and set our title as webinar or set a category, we can always still go back and make changes to that. So when we're on our panels, all we have to do to make a change is click what panel we want to make a change on, and then click on the little pencil icon to the left of the description of that panel. So you can see I can click through my different panels and it'll show me a preview of what's configured in that panel. And if I go back to basic info and click on the pencil for it right here, it will open up the edit for that. And I can see all those same settings I just selected. So I could even come in here and say, I want to turn on event contacts. And if I save that, it adds the additional event contacts panel there. And if I want that to go away, I can once again click on that basic info pencil right here. And I can come in here and I can say, I don't want event contacts. I can uncheck that and save. And now you'll see the event contacts option is gone from there. So those options that we select on basic information are the panels that show up on the left side hand over here to configure. I'm going to go top to bottom because that's just generally the way that we've kind of designed it to make the most sense. You're welcome to jump around and configure different panels in a different order, but going from top to bottom is usually the kind of easiest way to get your event created. The second page here is the formatted description page. When we click on the pencil for the formatted description, we get this little blank white space that we can use these editing tools to fill in a description about. You can simply just type in a description. This event is for, showing off our webinar. You can do things like inserting images and links. I'm not going to get too deep into this editing option. We do have a couple training videos specifically on the formatted description on our YouTube channel that go into the different things you can do here. But I will point out a couple really important items. One thing I like to recommend on the right-hand side over here, you'll see this insert page row option. This is an option where you can insert rows that will break it into kind of percentage-based sections. So you can do interesting things like a 50-50 row, and it'll add these dotted lines. The dotted lines will not show up when people look at it. It's just a way to let you see what you're working on. And this will section your content in your description into a 50% row, so we can have side-by-side options here. You can get really creative with that. But putting it inside of these rows will stop any images or text from running long or breaking the bounds of the event. So it's always a good idea to use these page rows, even if all you do is just choose the 100% width option and put all of your stuff inside just one dotted line box. Totally fine, but it helps to make sure that your content in your description is mobile responsive, so it looks good on a phone, it looks good on an iPad, looks good on any tablet or laptop. So whatever you want to do, I always recommend just clicking 100% width and then putting your cursor right inside that dotted line box and typing away there. So that's one tip here that I like to kind of encourage. The other thing I like to show off is if you wanted to put in something like a logo at the top of this, there's a couple options on this kind of toolbar here. This icon in between the camera and the toolbox is the insert image icon. That is one that I really like to use. So if I need to insert, say, like a flyer that I've already made for my event, you can put that right in here. You can always come into this page and just show files and look at images that are already on your website. But more often than not, when you're running a new event, someone on your team or maybe you yourself made an image that you want to share and you need to upload it from your device. So you can always jump straight to the bottom left over here where it says upload new file, and you can browse your computer. So there's that little browse button. Then you can search through your files for an image to upload, and it'll put it right into this list. And then you can save and add it to the formatted description. So if I wanted this image of this suitcase with the sunglasses on top, if I wanted that to be, say that's a flyer, we can upload that. Do keep in mind that PDFs don't work for uploading. It does have to be an image format. But if you have Adobe Acrobat Reader, or you can just take a screenshot of a PDF and just upload it as an image there. But we can come in here and we can select an image and we can just drop that image right into our description. And then we can do things like resizing it. So if we right click on it, you can say properties and I can make it a little bit smaller if I want it to be, a little bit smaller than it was showing up. And then I can do things like centering the image using the tools up here. So I always recommend that you get in here and play around with it. There's not a lot you can hurt in here. If you ever mess anything up, you can always just backspace a bunch and delete everything there. Or you can use the little trash can option to remove the entire row. But we can come in here and put our description, if I remember how to spell. Um, But yeah, so that's how we can put in rows, we can put in text, and we can put in images to kind of describe our event. We also have a couple other options, things like our event rules. If you wanted just an extra text field to say, hey, don't park, across the street at the restaurant, or you'll get your car towed. You can also do things like a share image. So that's the image that gets shared on things like X and Instagram. If you were to use the share option up here, this little button at the top that says share. When we share this to a social media platform, we can select an image, and that is the image that will get used when it's being shared on social media. Once again, we'll see the this panel is complete option. So once we've got our images, our flyers, our text in our description box, we can say this panel is complete and save. And it'll give us a little preview of what it's going to look like. And if we were to go back to our event, we would now see this is the description of our event. Pretty simplistic here. I've just got an image, but you could imagine that could be used as a flyer or your club logo. If I click on this back to event button, it'll actually show me what my event looks like. And it'll say, there's my event's webinar, about the event, and I'll see that image that I uploaded. And then there's my, date and time and details about the event. If I want to get back to editing the event, I can always click on the pencil again. So that pencil and that back to event option, those just take me back and forth between the front of the event and the pencil event. Or in the admin event, sorry, not pencil. Now that I've said that this panel is complete, you'll notice I now have another green dot next to formatted description. And the next yellow dot is my location. This one's a pretty simple one. This one's pretty straightforward. It's just address information or video conferencing information. So if it's taking place over Zoom or Google Meets or something like that, we can put in a link here. If it's taking place in a physical location, we can put that information here. Some organizations, especially since 2020, people have started having a lot of hybrid events where some people show up in person, some people show up online. You can certainly put both a physical address and video conferencing information so people can join either way. Whenever you're sharing a video conferencing option, there's two ways that people can get that. You can either choose to show that on the event, so they do not need to register. They can just simply click the link. If you want people to register in order to attend by video conference, there's another option that says send in an email after registration. So this would require someone to register in order to get that link. And if there's payment required, it would require them to register and pay before they get an email with the video conferencing information. So we can fill this out. There is an option to save addresses. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug in the address there. I will go ahead and say this panel is complete. You can simply just fill in an address, copy and paste your video conferencing information, and save, and you've got a physical location set for your event. The next two pages are probably the most important ones. These are definitely the ones that have the most bells and whistles, and these are definitely the pages that are the most cumbersome to understand. So if we take a look at registration and fees, and we click on the pencil for that option, we'll see we have a lot of toggles on this page. Not all of them are mission critical. Not all of them are required for you to fill out, but there are some that are very, very important here. Right at the top for registration, is registration required? So there's a few options here. Most commonly, what people do is either registration is required, meaning if you want to attend this event, you got to sign up online, or people will do registration is required by close date, meaning if you want to attend this event, you've got to sign up online and it shuts off at some point. So whether you choose required or required by close date, you'll see a registration open date and time. So this is when registration becomes available. And then if you choose by close date, this is when registration shuts down. So people after a certain date and time can no longer register. If you if you want to have registration open immediately, you don't have to fill in right now. You can just leave the open date blank. And as soon as we save all these settings, people can immediately start signing up. If you fill in a date and time, then people will not be able to register for the event until that time. I'm just going to leave it as what most people do, which is just required. The other thing we can select is registrant list visibility. Most people leave this as none. What this means is the registrant list visible to other people? So if we leave it as none, that means only admins can see who has signed up for this event. Only people who have access to the back end of this event. If we set it to public, anytime someone registers, everyone can see that they've signed up for the event. If we set it to members only, then that would be members can see who else has signed up. And the final option is registered members only. This is the one I see that if this gets used at all, it's the most common one, which is once you sign up, you can see who else is also signing up. Most people, again, leave that as none. Show registrants. So when you're looking at that registrant list, this is what you show. Do you show their full name from their member profile, or do you show the mailing name that's entered? Again, most commonly, people leave that as full name. The register button. So this is what the button says that people click to register. You can change that. You can say register or register now and make it a little bit more urgent by putting a bunch of exclamation points. Or you can say register here. It's just what the button says that people click to sign up for the event. Avoid duplicate registrations. This is one that I usually like to turn on and leave it as yes, specifically for events that have a limited capacity. If you set it to avoid duplicate registrations, it will stop people from signing up more than once. So if someone signs up and then they go and they forgot that they signed up and they try to sign up again, and then they sign up again, there's all the chance in the world that they might sign up multiple times and take up multiple seats without realizing it. I also especially love to avoid duplicate registrations if it's an event with a fee, because processing refunds can be a bit of a headache sometimes. And if someone actually accidentally signs up 2 or 3 times, and then suddenly you have to cancel those registrations and send them a refund, it can be a bit of a headache. Show date, time, and location. This is one that I think we will be changing the terminology on pretty soon. This one gets confusing for a lot of people because they say, yes, of course I want to show the date, time, and location. More often than not, you probably want to leave this as no. The reason being, it's a little bit misleading. What it's saying is during registration, throughout the entire registration, do you show date, time, and location? So we should probably add a little bit of text there, and we're going to update that. But if you leave this as no, the date, time, and location still shows up on the event details. They can absolutely see when and where it is taking place. If you set this to yes, then on every single page of registration, they're going to see a repeat of the date, time, and location. It just gets a little bit cumbersome in my mind, so I usually leave that as no. Sequence numbers, this is an option that's only showing up because we have it toggled in our event defaults. You normally won't see that unless you specifically turned it on. This is useful for people who do things like raffles or something and they want unique numbers that they can then, randomize and pull a number from a hat kind of thing. Or if you're just tracking a like a ticket ID kind of thing, you can turn this on and track. So the first person that registers will be, 1000 and then 1001, 1002. It just counts up as people register and it assigns them a number. Most people don't use sequence numbers. I don't see that get used all that often. Capacity is an important one. So if you have an event and you can only fit, say, 50 people in it, we could say, the capacity for this event is limited and we can only fit 50 people. And then we've got the show capacity option. So do we make that visible? If we say no here, then people cannot see how many spots are available. And then there's also this show how many slots are left. So if we say show capacity, yes, they can see that there's a limit of 50. But if we say show slots available, no, they would see that there's a limit of 50, but they wouldn't know how many spots are left. Most people I see that set a capacity turn both of these to yes. So they can see, hey, we can fit 50 people. There's already, 45 registered. Make sure you get in because there's only 4 or 5 spots left. So you want to make sure that, people know. Some organizations, they don't want people to know that information because they don't, for one reason or another, they don't want that to be public, but you have control over that. I'm not going to get too deep into the waitlist today. It's a pretty complex setting, but the short version is if you wanted to set a waitlist, once your event reaches capacity, if it's a capacity-based event, you can turn on a waitlist and you can say, sure, we can have 50 people attend and we can have, 5 people on the wait list. And then those people can get automatically notified or manually notified once a spot opens up. So if one of those 50 people cancels, then someone on the wait list would get first dibs, kind of get first crack at getting into that seat before it goes back out to the public. Fees and payments. This is one that sends a lot of people into a bit of a tizzy. So there's a lot of options here. Are you charging a fee? Yes, no, or attendees will pay for their own charges. That is one that is kind of confusing for a lot of people. People tend to get stuck here and they say, well, where do I set how much the fee is? We will actually determine the price later. Right now, we're just determining, are we charging for this event? For today's example, I'm going to say yes, just so we can cover it a little bit. But if you're having an event that's free, all you have to do is just say no fee and people won't have to sign up. If you're having an event where people show up and it's at a restaurant or it's at I saw someone mention the example of like a museum, you might want to choose the attendees pay for their own charges. So it's not, that they're paying for attending the event. It's that they might have charges to pay at the event itself. And that's something you would want to make clear back in your formatted description is put in the description, maybe in bold text, you're not paying the club, but you're paying the venue for, X, Y, and Z. But there's an option to say, this will show up, attendees pay for their own charges. That'll show up in the event details. But for today, we're going to say we are charging a fee. For payment options, 99 times out of 100, people select pay in full and advance only. They want people to pay online. So if you have an organization with, a ClubExpress payment processor connected, they can pay for the event with their credit card online without having to kind of like pay by cash or check or some other separate system. We can say, I want you to pay right away. There is an option to require immediate payment. If you just say pay in full in advance and you say immediate payment required, no, they can register and they will be fully registered for the event, taking up a seat, but it will not require them to pay until a later date. It will not complete their registration. So again, if you are having like a virtual meeting, they're not going to get that Zoom link until they pay. But if you set the immediate payment required option to yes, what that does is it sets a 30-minute timer, kind of like anyone who's ever used Ticketmaster will be familiar with this. You're taking up a seat and you have 30 minutes to pay. If you do not pay within those 30 minutes, it cancels your registration and gives your seat to the next person waiting. So immediate payment required is especially useful for those of you who have a limited capacity event with a fee. So if you have a capacity and a fee, people usually recommend also using the immediate payment required. That way, no one is taking up a seat without paying. You can do things like adding late fees. So does the fee change after a certain date? So you can have a fee, change from one uh, from one day to another. So you can say, hey, as of Saturday morning, the fee jumps from one price to another. So maybe they get an early bird pricing or they get a late fee if they don't sign up within a certain amount of time. You can also just say no and say, we're just going to charge one price. It doesn't matter when you sign up. You can also assign tax. So if there's, merchandise tax or something or sales tax for registering for your event, you can assign that there and it'll tack it on to their registration. And then you can use that to, pay the taxes for whatever event you're signing up for. I believe most of our organizations are tax exempt. A large number of Club Express organizations are tax exempt. So they usually aren't charging a tax there, but you have the option to tack on a tax if need be. Financial account, again, most people leave this just as master event registrations. It'll earmark all of the funds coming into the event as event registration. So in your reports, they'll show up as being a part of that financial account. They'll get categorized as event income. Attendance tracking, this is one that I like to turn on. So track attendance, I usually set to yes. If you end up forgetting to track attendance or something like that, it doesn't hurt at all. It just gives you the option to check off people that attended the event. Members cannot, like registrants cannot check off their own attendance. It is an attendance tracking where someone who is an admin for the event needs to go into the system and check off the people that attended. You may or may not see the attendance credit option that works with other modules. I think the continuing education module, you can assign credit for it, but in this case, we're not going to be covering those credits. We're not covering that module today. Registrant options. So there's two more settings on this page that I'd like to go over. Maximum guest is a very, very important one. So in most cases, people are signing themselves up for an event, but events can be made to be guest worthy. So you can allow people to bring additional guests. So we can say, yeah, you can bring a +1 or you can bring 4 extra people. Note that if you're only allowed to register yourself, you would want to leave this as 0. This means the person registering plus how many guests. So even if you leave this as 0, it will still let someone register themselves. It just won't let them bring additional guests. This is how many additional guests you can bring. If you're allowed to bring a +1, again, that would just be 1. And then finally, I like to cover the non-member settings here. I have a pretty particular opinion about this, which is I don't like to require whenever possible because it's just a barrier to completing your registration. If something here is set to required, that means you must fill it in order to complete your registration. If you don't fill it in, it will not let you finish your registration. So for non-members, that means it is a non-member signing themselves up for your event. The only thing I usually require is an email address. That way I have a way to get in contact with them. The rest of these fields, I might show them, I might not show them, or I might make it optional. So you'll see there's a few options. Do I want their phone number? You'll see options like do not show, show, or show and require. So if I say do not show, then they do not get the option to give us their phone number. If I say show, then they have the option to apply their phone number. If I say show and require, then they must give us a phone number in order to continue their registration. For guests, this is if I am bringing someone to the event, if I'm, say, a member or I'm a non-member and I'm bringing an additional person that is not a member, what information do I have to add about my guest? And I usually don't require anything here. You can show whatever you like, but I may not know my guest's phone number. I may not know my guest's email. And if I require it, it can be a barrier to registration. So that is our registration and fees. Again, we did not decide how much it costs to attend this event here. The next page is where we determine who is actually allowed to sign up for this event. And if there's a fee, how much they will have to pay to attend. So this is where it gets a little bit complex. And this is where we can start to kind of really customize our event. We can say on this page, what is the registrant type? So what type of person is allowed to register for this event? And you'll see there's a lot of options here. The most common setup that we see is going to be the active members option, meaning, hey, our members are allowed to attend our event. And we can call their registration, we'll call it a member ticket. And in order to attend, in order to purchase a member ticket, what is the fee? If on that previous page we said there is no fee, then this field just will not show up. There will be no way to enter a fee because on that registration and fees page, we said that we do charge a fee. We will now see the option to come down here, select a registrant and say members attending our event. We will charge them $10. And then you'll see a visibility option. You'll see the option for everyone. This does not mean availability. This just means visibility. So who can see that members pay $10? I usually just leave all of these as everyone. If we say admins and coordinators, then that means only an admin can actually see this option and members wouldn't be able to select it. Usually that's for things like sponsor options. It's not usually one that people select. An interesting one is eligible members only, meaning you have to be a member that can register for this option in order to see that that's available. So that is a pretty good option there to select for members. Again, that just means that if I'm doing something like only members of the committee can attend, you have to be eligible for this registration type in order to see it at all. Most commonly, 9 times out of 10, people are selecting everyone here and just leaving it be, and everyone can see what it costs to attend for everyone else. So we come in here, we say add, and now we've added the option for a member ticket for this event. It's available to any active member and it costs $10. We're not having a late fee, so that doesn't show up at all, and it's visible to everyone. And we can repeat this process as many times as we want to add other options. So now we can just roll that back and say registrant type, let's allow for non-members. So there's an option that says any non-member, and I'll say this is a non-member ticket. And a non-member ticket, I'm going to charge them a little bit more. So our members get a discount and our non-members will pay a little bit more. So it's one of the benefits of membership. And now we can actually control, we can say, hey, we can set different prices for different people given certain criteria. We could also do something like, members of a selected committee as well. So we can say if you're on the board of directors, we can say board of director ticket. And we can say the board of directors only pays $5. They get a special, for their service on the board, they get a special price. And if we wanted to hide that, we could even be a little sneaky with it and say eligible members only. And so now from behind the scenes, we can say the board of directors is going to get a special $5 discount on it, but only eligible members, meaning you have to fit this criteria. So only the board of directors will actually see that their ticket is $5. That ticket price will be invisible to everyone else who isn't on the board of directors. The one final thing I like to point out for registration types is that if people are allowed to bring guests, you would want to make sure to add guest registration options. So right now we've got the option for an active member to register themselves for the event. If we go in here and we say member guest, so there's 3 membership guest options. We can say that there is an option for members to register another person in their membership. There's an option for members to register another member, or there's an option for members to register another non-member. So we can say, yeah, let's allow our members to bring guest non-members, and we'll say guest. And we'll say, since they're a non-member, you're still going to pay the $15 ticket price, and we can add that in here. And so now when a member registers, they have the additional option to bring a guest for an additional $15. So those are all of our different available options for registration. When we save this option, these ticket options are going to show up when people are registering for the event. The final thing I want to cover before we go into how to register and start wrapping up. I know I'm running long. Events always does that. If we head into our emails page, this is where we can set up our confirmation and reminders. This one is fortunately a pretty easy setup. There's not a lot of bells and whistles here. There's only 2 major sections. The first section is email confirmation. So this is additional information that will get added to the standard confirmation email. So when someone registers for the event, once they're done registering, they're going to get an email that says, hey, thank you for registering for this event. And it's going to automatically include all of the standard event details. Anything we type in this box will also be included in that email. So we can say something like, parking is validated or something like that. And that way people know, hey, when I sign up and park at the garage across the street, I can get my parking validated, just additional useful information. It could be, parking's validated, fancy dress, anything that you want included in that email that goes out to people that register for your event, you can put there and it will show up in that email. Then there's also our automated email reminders. And these are just standardized emails that just say, hey, a reminder that you signed up for this event. It's happening in X days. So we can say, yes, I want to automatically send a reminder to people that signed up and let them know, hey, we saw that you signed up. Don't forget the event's taking place. We can send that up to twice. And this is just a number of days before. Usually we see something like, 3 days before and 1 day before. And that will mean that 3 days before the event, they'll get an email saying, hey, you signed up for this event. Don't forget to attend. And then finally, you get 1 day before the event. So the day before, they get an email, hey, you signed up. There's also an option to remind everyone this event is taking place. So the second option down here automatically send a reminder to all members. If you are a club with, if you're a club with subgroups, you'll see this little drop down to select a specific subgroup if you don't want to notify everyone in the organization. But if you don't have subgroups, then it's just going to say all members, and that little drop down box won't appear at all. But the same story, we can say just a reminder that this event is taking place, and we'd love to see you there. We can say 3 days before, 1 day before. We can even do a few weeks before if you wanted to do something like 14 days. And you can let people know ahead of time, just a little gentle email reminder that the event is taking place. Then we can say this is complete. I'm not going to save those because I don't want to accidentally generate some emails. And we'll save. And now we've got green lights across the board. One thing I like to point out before I walk through registration really quickly, one thing I like to point out is this little button right here, refresh event. People get scared of this button. I would say definitely don't get scared. If you ever are experiencing issues where the event isn't loading correctly or someone got stuck in registration, that does happen from time to time. Not very often, but if you make a lot of changes, especially if you make changes to your event while someone is registering, it can sometimes cause issues with their registration. The easiest way to fix that is just click refresh the event. It'll say, it won't cause, any, deleted data. We'll say, okay. It clears the cache for the event and it just resets the event. It doesn't delete anything. All of your registrants are still there, but it just kind of refreshes the event to make sure that everything is up to date and accurate, and people can then try to register again. It's just a useful little button to make sure that everything is running the way it's supposed to if you make a lot of changes all at once. Now let's go take a look at what the event looks like on the front side. So I already mentioned once, but if we click this back to event button, this is what the event's going to look like if people go click on it on our calendar. We'll see how many spots are left. We'll see the name of our event. There's our little description. Here's all of those details that we filled in. If we click the register here button, it'll take us down to the bottom where we can fill in who is registering. Because I'm an administrator, I will see all of the options that are available for registration. If I am let's say not a member, so I'm not logged in. Let me go log out really quickly. If I log out of the website and go back to my calendar, we can see there's my event webinar that I created. And when I go down to select my registrants, you'll notice there's fewer options for me because I am not a member. I can only choose a non-member ticket. Because there is no option for me to register as a member if I'm not logged in as a member. So depending on how I'm interacting with the website will change what options I see. But what the registration looks like when someone is registering for one of your events, if I click register, so I'm choosing one non-member ticket and I choose to register, it will confirm who's signing up. It'll ask me to enter any relevant information. So I'm just going to say this is a test person. I'm required to enter my email. And then it will ask me to confirm the information and then proceed to payment. You'll notice there's that warning that says once you complete registration, you must be paid by credit card within 30 minutes or it will be canceled. And if I complete my registration on this page, it will take me directly to the payment page Once again, it'll tell me I have to complete this payment. This is a demo website, so it doesn't have credit card options, so I can't actually complete my payment, so this will get canceled. But if your organization has a credit card account with us, payment method would be set to credit card. They would type in their credit card information and hit submit payment, and then they would be fully registered. So that's really the whole process. Do keep in mind that the more you kind of embellish your event, if you add things like questions or uploads or anything like that, that does add extra steps to the registration process. So it's going to, if you add questions, it's going to add an extra screen where it asks them those questions. If you add different types, different activities for your event, it's going to add an extra page where it'll ask them for those activities. And you'll see now that I've registered, I've got 49 spots left because I submitted one registration. So let's talk about two final things before we sign off for today. I know I'm always going over time with these webinars, but if we go back to our control panel and go to the website, let's show two interesting things. I saw some questions about this. If we wanted to create an event and then copy it a few times, there is a clipboard icon on the event management page. So you'll see there's my 4/30/2025 events webinar that I just created. If that's taking place on 4/30, but we know we're going to do this again on, let's say, a month later, we can come over to, we can find our event. We can either search for it or just hit search with it being blank and find our event from our list. And I can click on that little orange clipboard, and you'll see there's a few options. I can say I still want it to be named the event webinar. For now, I'm only making one copy. There is an option to create multiple copies. I do like to tell people to be careful when you're making multiple copies, because once you create those copies, they're all standalone. They have their own registrations. They have their own details. So if you have to update this event, let's say we had a typo in the name, or we want to change the location it's taking place, we have to change it for all of the copies. So you want your original to be perfect before you go make a bunch of copies, because then it'll just duplicate your work that you have to go to update and fix those. For now, let's just make one copy. We'll say, this is going to be taking place on the 25th of May, and I hit copy event. And now there we go. 5/25/2025. There's another events webinar. You'll notice that when we look at the column registrants and capacity, it copies everything about the event except for who's registered. So anyone who signed up for this event is not automatically signed up for the 5/25 event. So we can copy our events without having to worry about duplicating any registrations or anything like that. All right. Let me go ahead and cover the events default page really quickly, and then we'll take a few questions and we'll call it for today. While we're on the events manager page, if we head over to the configure button one more time, this is that place where we had our categories. I want to point out, especially for new admins who are filling out their calendar, the event defaults page can be very, very useful. What this page does is it has all of the event settings that we just went through. It has most of them here. We can come through and we can essentially set up the default standing. So what time does the event start? What is our event increment? Who is this event visible to? Things like that. Our view buttons. You'll see a lot of those same settings that we set up show up here. And if we change the default, whenever we create an event again, it'll use this default. So if we set all of our settings to the most common settings that we use, most of those settings will be set for us, and it reduces the amount of things that we have to configure every single time we create an event. So it's a really useful way to say, hey, we don't really use questions, but we definitely set up email confirmations. We definitely turn on cancellations and event contacts and format description. We can come and set these, and then it just saves us that many clicks next time we make an event. Same with our start times, all of that stuff. A lot of useful things here. And I will point out a handful of items that are really important under our events section here. So when we're on our event defaults page, one of the defaults that we can set is the default calendar view right here. And there's that option grid view and then all the different list views that you can see. And this is that same option that we were looking at before. We were looking at the calendar, we were looking at it in the grid, we were looking at it in the vertical list. We can say, I want everyone to default to the grid view, or I want everyone to default to the future list view. It doesn't lock them into it. They can still change to whatever view they want. It just means the first time they log in, that's what they're going to see the very first time. So you can kind of select that for them. And there, yeah, there's just about every setting that is a variable in our events can be set up here. So that way it saves us a ton of time as we create these events. All right. As always, I've gone over time a little bit, but let's take just a couple minutes. Evan, are there any important questions I can cover before we close out for the day?
I was answering questions, but when you were looking at the copy item, did you actually open the window to show how people copy in like those settings?
Yeah, yeah. So again, that's just
So like,
if we're looking at the list of calendar events here. So we're in our events manager. We've searched for events. Every event that we see here has a little clipboard icon. That clipboard icon is the option to copy an event. Originally, I just made one copy, but because this is a demo website, I can do whatever I want. I can make multiple copies, and we can say this event takes place, you know, every 2 weeks. So we can say weekly starting on the June 5th, and I'm going to say every 2 weeks on Thursday. And what it'll do is every other week, every other Thursday, and I'll say it's going to go for 5 occurrences, or I can just set an end date and I can set up whatever end date I want. But I'm just going to say 5 occurrences, and I'll copy it, and it'll create 5 more of that events webinar that I just made. So I can copy that out to as many as I want. Someone asked, how did I get to that page where I was talking about setting up items ahead of time to make future events easier? That's the event defaults page. So, again, if I go to my control panel, go to the website tab of the control panel, click on events, that takes me to my events manager page. And then where I get to defaults is configure event defaults. So it's this gear configure icon, event defaults. I don't have time to go through every single setting because there's tons of them on this page. But essentially, what you're looking at is just a list of what a standard event looks like. And you can just kind of just go down this page and fill out anything that you fill out here will be automatically applied whenever you add a new event. And just saves you a little bit of time. So you just kind of create what 90% of your events look like. You enter it here, saves you a bunch of clicks, makes creating events a lot faster. Someone asked, how do you cancel an event if weather prohibits? So if we needed to cancel, let's say this upcoming events webinar, we needed to cancel it. What we would do is we would come in here and click on the pencil icon to get back to the back end of the event. And there's a button over on the right-hand side that says cancel event. If we click on that, my website will take a second to load. It's one of our demo websites, and sometimes they're a little bit slower. Let's try that again. Well, my cancel event button's not working. It's probably because I'm on one of our fake websites that gives me issues sometimes. Let me see if another event will let me cancel it. Nope, my cancel button's not working on my demo website. I'll have to look into that. But what happens when you cancel an event? It gives you a little pop-up to say, are you sure you want to cancel? You say yes, and then you say yes again, and it should cancel. If that cancel button isn't working, I will log a bug about that and we'll get that fixed. I always tell people when you're canceling an event, be very, very sure that you are canceling it because it will send an email to everyone that is registered, letting them know that the event has been canceled. So you're going to be emailing a bunch of people if you have a lot of registrants. Also, make sure that when you're canceling an event, if there are any paid registrations for that event, people will be credited for that registration. So if I paid by credit card, $30 for an event, it's going to add a $30 credit to my account on the website that I can use towards future events. If you wanted to refund that to their credit card, there are options for doing so. I think our most recent webinar was about how to process refunds and how to handle credits. So you can see more info about that there. Let's see. Someone asked, is there an option for a member to have access to create a full event? No, there is not an option for a member to create a full event. The primary reason why is that full events allow for charging credit card charges. Full events also allow for more detailed email controls. So it would be giving a little bit too much access to the back end of the system to a standard member. If you have a handful of members that you want to have access like that, you can cherry pick those people and you can go into your control panel and head over to the club tab. That might be the association or organization tab. But the tab in between money and communications, if you click there, you can actually add under setup admins and coordinators. You can add a coordinator, and if you add them as a coordinator and just say events and you only check the events option, you can essentially say, I want this person to have access to events and only events. So that is a way you could do that. I would recommend against assigning, a lot of people access to events because it can just kind of lead to a lot of busy calendars and a lot of people having access to, people's information. It gets complex pretty quickly. But if you have a handful of members, 4 or 5 members who are in charge of creating events, you can definitely add them as a coordinator and set them up. You select that person from the list, and I can say, I want Mary Smith to have access as a coordinator to manage events, and I can save this page without giving access to any of the other parts of the system. And now Mary Smith shows up on the list of people who's a coordinator, but I only selected events there. So that's how you could do that. All right. Before I spend too much more time, I'm going to go ahead and say that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Again, we'll be doing more of these sessions in the future. We'll be covering different event topics, so keep an eye out for those. And also keep an eye out for the recording of this webinar. It'll be on our YouTube channel in probably 2 or 3 days here, so probably Friday or Monday. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you for your great questions. Thank you, Evan, who is always a champ in our in the chat. He answers so many questions all the way throughout. So I saw him getting praise, and he absolutely deserves it. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll be talking to you in our next webinar.